So here's a really fast overview of the slight design modifications I made to the knife handles and how I went about machining them, the final version on my CNC mill, which I'm really sorry the footage somehow got lost on that, but yeah. So here's pretty much what I did with the knife handles. First of all, there were quite a few errors in the model that were causing the machining side of the software to freak out and start just trying to obliterate the whole handle because there were cracks and parts not joined. So I came along and I cleaned all that up. And then I also came along and I radiused all the inside corners larger than the 16th inch end mill. I believe I did them on a 0.65 diameter. So that way, instead of the tool just slamming into the corners, it more rolled around them. And on a part like this, it's purely visual, but I also wanted to make sure that the knife handles would have, a reasonably sized pocket, especially in the tiny areas, due to the fact that we were going to have the end mill in there. I just wanted to make sure it would actually work so I wasn't wasting my time trying to machine something that wouldn't work. Now, one other modification we made is we did add the trees logo, which is Ashley's logo. Originally, we had it raised up the first time we ran it, and it looked okay, but the radius left behind by the end mill I didn't like it, so I talked to Ashley about it, and she agreed it would actually be better if we inset the logo, which I think looks a lot better. You can also fill it in with enamel paint or whatever you want if you really want it to stand out. Lastly, one other thing we did is I came along and added the nuts on this side, so the corners are relieved so the pointy ends of the nut will not gouge into the wood. I'm actually surprised that they did not create a model with this originally. I understand they made them to be 3D printed in metal, but I think it would have actually looked pretty cool if they had the original screw hardware on both sides, but you know what? That's just me. I like mechanical stuff. One other revision that we made is the original handles were supposed to be 0.15 inches thick, and they were okay, but we felt the knife was a little bit on the thin side. So I increased the thickness of the knife handle up to 0.1875 inches. So that also helped just make the overall knife feel a little bit more rugged, and being that these are mostly hollow in wood, trying to remove them from the machining bed without damaging them is pretty darn difficult. It's not impossible, but we definitely sacrificed one or two, and being that walnut is pretty expensive, that was not very fun. So just making it thicker also just helped the hand feel a little bit, minor stuff like that. So initially when I carved them out on Ashley's x-carve, I was limited to using one tool only, which was not my favorite method because these curved surfaces definitely need to be done with a ball mill. We did them with a flat and it turned out okay, but I wasn't liking the quality. So my CNC mill lets me set my stock from the bottom, which is a huge advantage because we had some leftover wood that was a little bit on the thick side. So what I did is I just came along with the 16th inch end mill that cut everything, and I used what's called zero height tolerance. It's a term that we used over at my old job where we used one tool to do all the height work. So we knew as long as it was set properly from the bottom of our workpiece, everything would be the same relative height from its neighbor. We didn't have to worry about any tool mismatch. In this situation, not as critical, but it just made more sense to come along and first face it with the 16th inch end mill, which is not the most efficient, but in my application it worked fine. Then I came along and did a 2D adaptive path from the 3D milling side of Fusion and told it to select a certain bounding area, which I'll show you. So I just told it to select anywhere inside of there. It took care of everything else. I just gave it the various specs on the heights and the loads, and my numbers are probably a little bit conservative, but my mill does not have a very fast spindle, so I wanted to be able to take more aggressive cuts at a lower RPM. Then I came along with a 2D contour path and told it to ramp down slowly. This actually turned out to be more efficient than me trying to do it where I just came down, came down, came down. This, as it goes along, it is slowly dropping in height. And really all this was doing is it was just cutting clearance around the part for when I came along with a 16-inch ball mill, and I did all the finishing work. So it did the tapers for the hardware, and then it put a really, really nice edge around the outside of the knife handles. I mean, it turned out really, really beautiful. Then lastly, I came along with a little V-shaped engraving bit, and I had it run a small little pocketing program on the inside of the trees there. So what that did is it just created the recess for the trees, and that's how I went about doing the knife handles. The machining time on my machine with all the tool changes was right around an hour, which is pretty long, but you do have to remember my spindle maxes out at 5,000 RPM, and I believe Ashley's router starts spinning at least 10 or 15,000 RPM, so just something to keep in mind.